They said it would be just one night. It's only until the plumbers finish, Kylie smiled, nudging my suitcase into the motel room. Andrew kissed my cheek with that distracted, guilty air he'd worn since his father died. We'll pick you up in the morning, Mom. Promise. I watched their car pull away through the torn blinds, the taillights disappearing like an afterthought. But I didn't sleep. Something about the way they avoided eye contact, how my wallet had accidentally stayed in Andrew's car, my bones felt it before my mind did. Something was off. The room smelled like bleach and mildew, with a TV bolted to the dresser that flickered when I tried the remote. I didn't even bother unpacking. I'd only brought a weekend bag, a few essentials, one change of clothes, my medications, and the thick envelope of documents I never left the house without. At least I had that. Birth certificate, deed to the house, bank statements. I kept them in a zippered pouch, a habit from decades ago when I learned never to trust anyone with the paperwork of your life. In the morning, I opened the curtain to the sight of an empty parking lot. No Andrew, no Kylie, no phone call. I picked up the motel room phone. It was dead. No dial tone. I reached for my cell. It was still on the nightstand, charging. No service. That's when I noticed the envelope was gone. The pouch. The papers. Gone. I tore through my bag, through the drawers, under the mattress like a madwoman. Nothing. My heart thumped in that heavy, unsteady way it had ever since the bypass surgery. I had my pills, thank God, but no ID, no cash, no cards, no documents. Just a woman alone in a polyester dress and yesterday's makeup. I went to the front desk. The girl behind the counter looked like she couldn't be more than 20, chewing gum with indifference. Hi, I was dropped off here last night. My name is Margaret Delaney. I think there's been a mistake. My son was supposed to pick me up. She blinked at me, tapped her keyboard. No reservation under that name. I checked in yesterday. You were a walk-in, paid cash, no ID. I stared at her. That's not possible. My son made the reservation. He brought me here. She shrugged. You're checked out, as of 9 a.m. I'm still in the room. Room's been reassigned. I need to make a call. My son. No phone service today, she said, already turning away. Try next door. They've got a diner. I stumbled into the sunlight like a woman drunk. I was 74 years old. I'd never once been arrested, never missed a mortgage payment, never borrowed what I couldn't repay. I raised Andrew by myself after Harold died, worked 2 jobs while getting him through school. And now I stood outside a dingy motel, treated like some vagrant who'd overstayed her welcome. At the diner, the waitress let me use the landline. I dialed Andrew first. It rang 3 times, then went to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I tried again. Same thing. Then Kylie. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I called the house phone. Disconnected. It took me 2 bus rides and 1 long walk to reach our street, my street, Chestnut Avenue, where we'd lived since 1983. My roses were still blooming along the walkway, my hydrangeas overgrown, in need of pruning. I smiled a little, despite everything. Then I reached the door, and my key didn't work. I stood there, dumbfounded, trying it again and again until the key bent. I knocked, then rang. Nothing. Finally, a neighbor emerged, Janice McCready from across the street, the one with the yappy dog and the forever linty sweaters. "Oh, Margaret," she said, clearly flustered. "Janice, do you know what's going on? My key. I'm not sure I should. Andrew said you were moving out, that you were, relocating to assisted living near the coast. Said you'd left already." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What?" "That moving truck came yesterday morning. I saw them take out your things. I assumed Margaret, are you all right? I turned away before she could touch me. I walked around the house. The back door had a new lock. The garage code panel was gone. Every window shut tight. Even my bedroom curtains had been replaced. White blinds, cold and unfamiliar. I stood in the garden for a long time. I wasn't crying, not yet. I was calculating. I knew where Andrew banked. I knew the notary who'd helped me draft my will. I knew the contact at the county records office who once complimented my raspberry jam and told me, "You're sharper than most people half your age." I wasn't broken. Not yet. That night, I slept at a women's shelter downtown. It was clean, quiet, and the lady at the front desk gave me tea and didn't ask questions when I said I had nowhere else to go. I lay on the cot, staring at the ceiling. My body ached, and the cold seeped into my knees, but I was already planning. Tomorrow, I'd start with the bank, then the notary, then the county. I might be 74. I might be tired. But I still knew how to take care of myself. They thought they could erase me. They were wrong. The bank was my first stop. I arrived as the doors opened, the morning sun still low enough to throw long shadows across the sidewalk. Inside, the air smelled of printer paper and air conditioning. I walked up to the customer service desk with my back straight and my jaw set. "Good morning," I said calmly. "I need to speak to someone about my accounts. My name is Margaret Delaney." The young woman behind the counter smiled professionally. "Do you have your ID, Mrs. Delaney?" "No," I said. "It's been stolen." She hesitated. "I'm afraid I'll need some form of identification." "I've been a customer here for 40 years, I interrupted. "I opened my first account when you were in diapers. You'll find my face on the anniversary wall behind you, third from the left." She glanced, unsure. "Let me get the branch manager." His name was Eric. He'd started working at the bank about a decade ago, when he was fresh out of college and still unsure how to tie a tie. I'd given him a mint one day when he looked pale, and ever since he'd called me Mrs. D with a fondness that felt genuine. He came out from behind the frosted glass office, his smile faltering a little when he saw me. "Mrs. Delaney," he said, stepping forward. "Everything okay?" "No," I said. "I need to know what's been done to my accounts. I suspect someone has acted on my behalf without my knowledge." He looked at me, then gestured to the office. "Come on in." Behind the closed door, I sat while he pulled up my information. "There was a recent update," he said slowly, eyes scanning the screen. "Your son, Andrew, brought in a notarized power of attorney. It grants him full access." I felt the floor tilt slightly. "When?" "3 days ago. That was the day they dropped me off." "I didn't authorize anything," I said. Eric looked uncomfortable. "The document was notarized. We keep a copy on file." "Then I want to see it." He hesitated, but printed the pages. There was my name, my signature, except it wasn't mine. It mimicked my cursive, but it was too smooth, too careful. I never put that little loop in my G's, and I never, ever dotted my I's with a circle. "Forgery. They forged it," I said, placing the paper down with shaking hands. Eric exhaled. "Mrs. Delaney, if you suspect fraud, we can escalate this, but it will require a formal complaint. We'll have to freeze the accounts temporarily while we investigate." "Do it." "Are you sure? It will cut off all access, including your son's." "That's the point." He nodded, began typing. As he worked, I stared out the office window at the cars driving past. One of them, I imagined, might be Andrew's. Maybe he was on his way to another meeting about selling my house. Maybe he was sipping a latte and telling someone how confused I'd become in my old age. Maybe he thought I'd give up. When Eric finished, he turned to me. "I'll flag everything," he said, "and I'll contact our legal team, but you'll need to file a police report. And you should speak to an attorney." "I already have someone in mind," I said. Next was the notary's office. Not the one Andrew had used. I didn't know who that was yet. But the one I trusted. Donna LaRue. She'd notarized my will, my house deed, my durable medical power of attorney. She knew my real signature like her own. Donna took one look at the forged paper and snorted. "This isn't your handwriting," she said, pointing. "And this stamp isn't real. The notary ID doesn't match any active in the state." I blinked. "You're sure?" She nodded. "It's a copy-paste job. A cheap one, too. I've seen better forgeries from high school pranksters." I stared at the paper again. My name, a fake signature, a fake stamp. They really thought I wouldn't notice. "They think you're old," Donna said gently. "They're counting on people not believing you." "But you believe me." "I always have." I left her office with copies, affidavits, and an appointment with a lawyer Donna recommended, a sharp woman named Lynette Reyes, who'd once sued a nursing home chain into bankruptcy. But by the time I reached the county building to check on the house deed, I was starting to feel the weight of it. My body ached. My legs throbbed. I hadn't eaten all day. Still, I went in. I gave the clerk my name. She typed, clicked, frowned. "There was a transfer filed yesterday," she said. "Property reassigned under joint ownership, Margaret Delaney and Andrew Delaney." I closed my eyes. "Was there a witness?" "Yes." "Was I present?" The clerk looked uncomfortable. "I'm not allowed to say, ma'am, but you can file a contest. You'll need to speak with the assessor and submit documentation." "Then give me the forms." That night, I slept in a shelter again. A different one this time. Quieter. A volunteer offered me a cup of soup. I drank it slowly, letting the warmth spread into my hands. They thought I'd crumble. They thought I'd be too old, too confused, too tired to fight. But they forgot who I am. They forgot I raised a son, built a life from scratch, balanced checkbooks when every dollar mattered, stood in line at the DMV with a sick baby on my hip and a bag of groceries in the other arm. They forgot I'm Margaret Delaney, and I'm not done yet. The next morning, I woke before dawn, my body still aching from the cot and my nerves sharpened to a point. I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at my hands in the dim shelter light. They were thinner now, more veined than I remembered, but steady. I could still trust them to hold a pen, to write my name the right way, to open doors no one expected me to find. By 8:30, I was standing outside Lynette Reyes's office. It was in a modest brick building downtown. No flashy sign, just her name in small letters on the glass. That told me enough. Lawyers who win don't need neon to say so. Inside, her assistant, a crisp young man named Cody, offered me coffee and helped me fill out a basic intake form. He didn't flinch when I said I didn't have ID. "We'll fix that," he said simply, and ushered me into Lynette's office. Lynette looked like someone who could make a judge nervous with one raised eyebrow. Mid-50s, no-nonsense face, gray streaks in her bun like bolts of lightning. She stood to shake my hand. "Margaret Delaney, Donna called me about you. Said you've got a forged POA and a family with boundary issues." "I've got more than that," I said. "I've got a son who dumped me in a motel, cleaned out my house, and forged my signature to take over everything." She nodded once. "Start from the beginning." So I told her. The motel, the missing documents, the fake power of attorney, the revised deed, the bank accounts. She didn't interrupt, just made notes, asked for dates and names. When I was done, She leaned back and exhaled slowly. "This is a full-on case of elder financial abuse," she said. "You're lucky you caught it early. Most people don't realize until everything's already sold or lost. I only caught it because I couldn't get back into my house." "Well," she said, "we're going to make sure you do. What can we do first?" "Emergency injunction to freeze any financial activity tied to your name, especially real estate. Then we challenge the POA, file for fraud investigation, and if necessary, criminal charges. The forged signature alone is a felony. And if your son's wife was involved, she's liable too." "I don't want to ruin his life," I said quietly, almost surprised by my own voice. "But I want mine back." Lynette looked at me evenly. "Then we do this clean and fast. You'll need to stay off the radar for a bit. If he finds out you're moving legally, he might try to sell the house or empty accounts before we freeze them." "I've already frozen the bank accounts," I said. "The manager was an old friend." "Good. You're ahead of the curve." She handed me a packet of papers and a schedule for the week ahead, affidavits to sign, hearings to prepare for, evidence to collect. Then she paused. "Margaret, do you have anywhere safe to stay?" I shook my head. "Shelter downtown. It's clean enough." Her eyes softened just for a second. "Give me a moment." She stepped out. A few minutes later, Cody came back in with a note in hand. "We've arranged for a temporary apartment through a partner nonprofit," he said. "It's small, but safe. Rent-free. Just until we get things sorted." I wanted to argue. Pride rose up like a reflex, hot and foolish. But I was tired. And I knew this wasn't charity. This was strategy. "Thank you," I said. That night, I sat on a real bed in a quiet room with a locked door and a lamp that worked. The apartment was no bigger than a shoebox, but it had dignity. A kitchenette, a little desk, a bathroom with clean towels. I ran the faucet just to hear the sound of something that belonged to me again. I pulled out a notepad and started writing. A list of everything I remembered being taken. House, Chestnut Avenue, primary checking account, pension account, automatic deposits. Power of attorney, forged. Insurance contacts, social security information. Then I started another list. People who believe me. Donna, Eric at the bank, Lynette, myself. That last name, I circled it. Twice. The next day, Lynette filed the emergency injunction. We had a hearing date, but until then, I needed to prepare. I took the bus across town to the Central Records office, spoke to a clerk named Rosalind, who still wore the same bright green glasses I remembered from years ago when I used to drop off Harold's property taxes. She greeted me with a cautious smile. "Mrs. Delaney, I haven't seen you in a while." "I've been busy losing my life to my son's ambitions," I said dryly. "I need any records of deed transfers from the last 10 days. She didn't ask questions, just printed them out and quietly slid them across the counter. There it was, in ink and county seal. A new deed listing Andrew Delaney as joint owner based on voluntary transfer and agreement. My signature looked clean, too clean. Rosalind leaned in. He came in with a woman, blonde, maybe mid-30s, seemed nervous, signed fast. "Kylie." I thanked her and left. At the pharmacy, I paid in cash for a week's supply of my medication. That part scared me the most. Not the legal fight, not the house, not even the money. But the idea of waking up one morning with nothing in my bloodstream to hold my body upright. I couldn't afford weakness. That night, back in the apartment, I looked at the deed again. I thought of the hydrangeas, my bookshelves, the teacups Harold brought me from Tokyo, all under someone else's name now. No, not someone else's. Mine. Still mine. And I was going to take it back, page by page, signature by signature. Even if I had to walk into court in orthopedic shoes and a coat too thin for spring, I'd do it. Because they dropped me off and thought that was the end. But it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. I woke early again, before the sun filtered through the blinds of the little apartment. My body wasn't used to stillness. Years of waking to alarm clocks, to Harold's coughs, to Andrew's cries in the night, had trained me to rise before the world did. Old habits, like old hurts, don't go quietly. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of instant coffee, reading the photocopies of the forged deed Lynette had highlighted. Voluntary transfer. That word, voluntary, burned hotter than any betrayal. There was nothing voluntary about being abandoned in a motel without money or phone access. Nothing voluntary in watching your life repackaged under someone else's name. Lynette had scheduled our first court date. Just a motion hearing to freeze the house deed, to stop Andrew from selling it. It was next Thursday. That gave us 5 days. I spent those days collecting evidence. First, I went to the moving company. It wasn't hard. There's only one major outfit in our part of town. The girl behind the counter was wary at first, but when I explained who I was and what I needed, she softened. "Your son said you were already in assisted living," she said, tapping her keyboard. "Said you'd signed everything over." "He lied." She blinked, then quietly printed the service order and invoice. Andrew's name was on every line. His signature again, clean, neat, nothing like the quick strokes I'd seen on his birthday cards since he was 10. Next, I visited the local post office. The mail forwarding slip was there too, signed electronically, redirected to a P.O. box, not even to his own home. "He said it was temporary," the clerk explained. "Didn't mention you at all." Each lie stacked on the next like kindling. I wasn't angry anymore. I was precise. There's a difference. Lynette met me that Friday afternoon to go over what I'd found. She was pleased. "This paints a pattern," she said. "Intentional misrepresentation. He didn't just act without your consent. He tried to erase your presence from every document." "He wants my house," I said. "And my silence." "Well," she smiled, "he can't have both." Saturday, I returned to the street where my house stood. I took the bus again. No car, no taxi, just the city at my back, and a tote bag filled with records on my arm. I didn't plan to go inside. I just wanted to see it. But something caught my eye from the sidewalk. A van in the driveway, the back doors open, men hauling in large cardboard boxes. One of them had Stagecraft Interiors printed across the side. I stepped closer. Kylie stood on the porch, clipboard in hand, telling one of the workers where to place a faux marble pedestal in the living room. I saw it through the open door. They were staging my house. They were preparing it for sale. I walked up the lawn like I belonged there, because I did, and stopped at the base of the porch. Kylie's face went pale when she saw me. "Margaret," she said, with that fake bright voice people use when they don't know who's watching. "What a surprise." "This is my home," I said calmly. "And I see you're redecorating." She straightened. "Well, it's under new ownership now. Andrew and I thought it would be best to freshen things up. You always said the curtains needed changing." She laughed lightly. "I didn't." "Does he know I'm here?" "He's at the office. Can I help you with something?" I looked past her. A man carried out my antique mirror, the one I'd inherited from my grandmother. "Tell your husband," I said, "that his mother is not a memory. She's a witness, and she's coming home." Then I turned and walked back down the sidewalk, the weight of that moment settling into my spine like steel. The following Monday, Lynette submitted a cease and desist letter to the real estate agency. The staging company received an order to halt all work. A warning was filed with the county clerk's office. We had stopped the train, but we hadn't turned it around. That night, I found myself on the phone with someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Agnes, an old friend from my church days. We'd lost touch after Harold died. She picked up on the second ring. "Margaret?" she said, disbelief laced with hope. "Hi, Aggie." We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. She told me her knees were worse, that her daughter had finally married, that her grandson had flunked out of college but taken up painting. I told her. Just enough. "They tried to erase me," I said softly. "They picked the wrong woman," she replied. And I believed her. The next morning, I took a cab to the courthouse and sat in the records office lobby for nearly an hour, waiting to speak to a clerk about an older version of the house deed. I wanted every trace of what belonged to me. As I sat, a woman walked in. Mid-30s, tight ponytail, heels too sharp for comfort. Kylie. She hadn't seen me. She walked up to the front desk and whispered something. The clerk pulled up a file. Kylie leaned over the counter, brows drawn together. Her voice rose slightly. "It's urgent. The sale is scheduled." Then she turned and saw me. Our eyes locked. I didn't blink. She turned pale again, then spun around and left. I watched the door swing closed behind her, watched the clerk look at me, uncertain. "You know her?" he asked. "She's trespassing on memory," I said quietly. "But I'm reclaiming it." Back in the apartment that night, I opened the little window above the sink. The air smelled like spring rain and pavement. I boiled water for tea, took my shoes off slowly. There was a knock at the door. I opened it. And there stood Andrew. He didn't speak at first. Just stood there, his face unreadable, his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, like a boy caught doing something wrong and hoping to charm his way out of it. Andrew had always looked like Harold. Same sloped shoulders, same deep-set eyes. But there was something brittle now about the way he held himself. Like the lies had started to calcify under his skin. "Mom?" he said finally. I didn't answer. I left the door open and walked back into the apartment. If he wanted to talk, he could follow. He did. The place looked smaller with him in it. His presence, his cologne, even the click of his expensive shoes on the linoleum felt too large for the walls. I sat at the table. He remained standing, glancing around like he didn't quite know how to exist in a room that wasn't curated by a decorator or staged for approval. "This is where you're living now?" he asked. "For now," I said. "Until the court hears my case." He flinched slightly. "You didn't need to go that far." "No," I said. "You didn't need to go that far." Silence stretched between us. Finally, he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. It was grayer now than I remembered. Stress. Or maybe just time catching up to both of us. "I didn't mean for it to go like this," he said. "Kylie, she thought it was the best solution. The house was too much for you. You were forgetting things." "I wasn't forgetting anything," I snapped. "You just stopped listening." He looked away. "You lied to me," I continued, voice low. "You took me to a motel and left me there with no phone, no money, no keys. You forged my name. You transferred the deed. You tried to erase me from my own life. That's not true." "Which part?" He didn't answer. "I changed your diapers, Andrew. I sat up with you through croup and nightmares and broken hearts. I gave you everything I had, my time, my savings, my strength. And when I got old, when I slowed down, you decided I was inconvenient." "That's not fair," he said quietly. "Fairness ended when you signed my name to a lie." He sat down across from me, his elbows on the table like he was suddenly too tired to hold up his own shame. "We were drowning," he said. "The mortgage, Kylie's medical bills, the twins' school fees. I kept thinking if I could just sell the house, just get a little ahead, I could fix everything. I thought you'd understand." "You didn't even ask." He didn't deny it. He just stared at the chipped mug in front of him, as if it held the answers. "Mom, I know it was wrong. I do. But can't we fix it quietly? Without dragging everything into court?" I leaned forward slightly. "You want me to stay quiet so you can keep the house?" "I want us to heal," he said. "To move on." "You mean, pretend it didn't happen? Let you keep what isn't yours and call it peace?" "I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did." He was silent for a long time. "I didn't expect you to fight back," he said finally. That, more than anything, told me everything I needed to know. "No," I said. "You didn't." I stood. He did too. "I'm not your victim, Andrew. I'm not your burden. I'm your mother. And if I have to spend the rest of my life reminding you what that means, in court, in records, in sworn affidavits, I will." He looked at me, and something passed over his face. Regret, maybe. Or just the dawning realization that I wasn't bluffing. "I'll see you in court," I said. He left without another word. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay awake, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car outside, the soft buzz of streetlights. My body hurt. My heart hurt more. But there was no part of me that doubted what I'd done. I wasn't just defending my home. I was defending the woman I'd spent 74 years becoming. The next morning, Lynette called. "He came to see you, didn't he?" "Yes." "Good," she said. "That means he's scared." "Should I be?" She paused. "No, but you should be ready." I was. Because when your own child forgets who you are, what you've given, what you've endured, you don't argue. You remind them. You return, piece by piece, until your name means something again. And I hadn't even started. I didn't go outside for the next 2 days. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed quiet. The kind of stillness that lets you hear yourself think without the noise of other people's shame or excuses. I stayed in the apartment with my notes, my papers, my coffee cooling beside a stack of affidavits that had started to feel like armor. I read every line of that forged deed until the curves of my own name, copied, stolen, felt like bruises. By Wednesday morning, I was ready. Lynette picked me up at 8 sharp. She drove a small, silver sedan that smelled faintly of lemon and steel resolve. She didn't talk much on the way to the courthouse, and I didn't need her to. We were 2 women walking into battle with different scars, but the same aim. At the courthouse entrance, I spotted him. Andrew stood with Kylie by the marble steps, both dressed like they were going to a fundraiser. He in a tailored navy suit, she in a pearl-colored blouse that probably cost more than my rent. They looked polished, presentable, deliberate, but they flinched when they saw me. Good. We didn't greet each other. There was nothing left to say out here. Inside the courtroom, everything felt too bright. The windows let in the unforgiving kind of morning light that lays bare everything: lines, flaws, falseness. I sat beside Lynette, papers in hand, watching as the clerk called our case. Delaney versus Delaney, motion for injunction? The judge was a woman. Older, sharp-browed, silver-haired like me. I liked her immediately. Lynette stood first. Her voice was calm, deliberate, surgical. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Margaret Delaney, has been the victim of a calculated and unlawful effort to remove her from her home and control her financial assets through the use of a forged power of attorney and unauthorized property transfer." She submitted the evidence. bank statements, the fake signature, Donna's affidavit, Rosalind's witness statement. Each item passed across the clerk's hands like stones building a wall between me and the lie Andrew had built. Kylie shifted beside Andrew, her arms folded tight. Andrew's jaw clenched every time Lynette said the word fraud. Then it was their turn. Their lawyer, a man too slick by half, with hair like plastic, rose with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a family matter, not a legal one. My clients acted with concern and good intentions. Mrs. Delaney has shown increasing signs of forgetfulness and confusion. They believed she would be safer in assisted care." He turned to me, the performance thick in his voice. No one wanted to hurt her. I met his gaze head on. I didn't blink. The judge held up the document. "This signature," she said, "is already under forensic review." The lawyer nodded. "If it was misunderstood—" "It's not misunderstood," the judge interrupted. "It's contested. There's a difference." Silence. The room held its breath. "I'm issuing a temporary injunction," she said. "All sales activity related to the property will cease immediately. No access to funds without this court's approval. We'll schedule a full hearing to determine the validity of the transfer and the power of attorney." I exhaled slowly. "Mrs. Delaney," the judge added, turning to me, "I recommend you retain possession of any personal documents and belongings you still have, until we sort this out." "I intend to," I said. The gavel struck. Outside the courtroom, Andrew caught up with me. "You didn't have to do this, Mom. You're making a scene." "No," I said. "I'm making a stand." Kylie looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. Maybe she sensed that nothing she offered would sound right. Not now. Not after the judge's tone. Not after the paper trail we'd laid down piece by piece. Lynette and I walked away. Back in the apartment, I hung my coat carefully, then sat at the little table where all of this had begun. Just me, a mug of coffee, and the sound of my own heart beating slow and certain. I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. But I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Real. Visible. Present. That night, I pulled out a photo album I'd managed to grab before everything fell apart. I flipped through the pages slowly. Andrew in a dinosaur costume. Me holding a cake shaped like a volcano. His first day of school. His college graduation. A younger me with tired eyes and proud hands. I wasn't perfect. But I had been there. For everything. Now, for once, I was going to be there for myself. The battle had only just begun. But I wasn't backing down. The apartment felt smaller the next morning, not because it had shrunk, but because the weight I'd carried into it had grown lighter. There's a strange kind of energy that comes after the first real pushback, a sense of motion, like a train finally creaking forward on rusted tracks. I wasn't anywhere near the end, but I wasn't standing still anymore. I went back to the bank that afternoon, this time not as a woman asking for answers, but as a client reclaiming control. Eric met me at the entrance. "We saw the court's order," he said, ushering me inside. "I've already flagged the accounts and suspended all activity under the disputed POA. Your funds are secure, Mrs. Delaney." I nodded. "Thank you, Eric. But I'd like to do more than secure. I want to reset." He looked up. "I want to close every joint account Andrew has access to. I want new cards, new passwords, new signatures. Everything." He didn't hesitate. "We'll get started right away." We sat together for nearly an hour. I signed forms, answered security questions, re-established myself line by line. It felt like peeling off layers of someone else's decisions until I found my own voice again. "I'm also going to need to open a separate trust," I added, for a future transfer. Eric didn't ask what it was for. He just nodded and slid the forms across the desk. By the time I walked out, the sun had already begun to set. The sidewalks were bathed in gold, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to slow down. To breathe in the evening without bracing for a call or a new betrayal. Back at the apartment, a letter was waiting in my mailbox. Typed envelope, no return address. Inside, a note, folded neatly. "Mom, please call me. We need to talk. Things got out of hand." No signature, but I recognized the handwriting. Andrew's. Smoother than it had been in college, but still his. Still trying to sound calm when things cracked. I placed the note on the counter. Did he want to apologize? Or just to negotiate? Was he scared of losing the house? Or of losing me? The next morning, I went to see Donna. She'd agreed to help me draft a formal statement for the court. Something personal from my own words, describing what had happened. Her office was warm with the smell of paper and cinnamon candles. I liked that she kept it cozy. Professional didn't have to mean cold. "I brought notes," I told her. She smiled. "I'd expect nothing less." We sat together for hours, shaping my words into something legal. Not just emotional, not just outrage, but truth. When we finished, she looked up at me. "This isn't just about getting your house back, is it?" I shook my head. "It's about my name, my voice, my place in the story." Donna nodded. "Then you're already winning." Later that day, Lynette called. "They've filed a response," she said. "They're claiming your memory is impaired, that you consented but forgot. They've attached letters from 2 doctors, none of whom have treated you." My throat tightened. "Can they do that?" "They can try," she said. "But they'll have to prove it in court. And I've already lined up a neurologist willing to evaluate you independently. Someone reputable." "Good." "They're grasping, Margaret. That's what this is." I stared at the envelope on my counter again, the unsigned note. "They're scared." "Yes," Lynette said. "And when people are scared, they get sloppy. Let them." That evening, I received another visitor. This time, it wasn't Andrew. It was the twins. I opened the door and there they stood. Emily and Ben, my grandchildren. 19, barely adults, eyes full of confusion, and something else I couldn't quite name yet. "Hi, Grandma," Emily said, hesitating. We heard what's going on," Ben added. They came in, sat awkwardly on the couch, glancing around the room like they were visiting a museum exhibit. I made tea, because what else does one do when a broken branch of family reappears? "We didn't know," Emily said. "About the house. About the motel. Dad told us you were moving, that it was your choice. He said you were tired," Ben added, "that you wanted to be closer to the coast." I smiled without warmth. "And you believed him?" They both looked down. "We should have checked," Emily whispered. "We're here now," Ben said. I sat across from them, studied their faces, the same freckles Andrew had as a boy, the way Emily wrinkled her nose when she was nervous. "What happens now?" Emily asked. "I fight," I said simply. "In court, in records, with everything I have left." Ben looked like he wanted to ask more, but didn't. When they stood to leave, Emily hugged me. Tentative at first, then tighter. "You don't deserve this," she said. "I know," I replied. They walked out into the evening, just 2 kids caught between love and loyalty. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first crack in the wall Andrew had built around the truth. As I closed the door behind them, I whispered the same thing I'd told myself in the mirror that morning. They forgot who I am. But I haven't. The day of the psychological evaluation came with rain. Not a downpour. just that steady, whispering drizzle that paints the streets in gray and makes everything feel slower. I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual that morning, brushing my hair, smoothing my blouse, checking the buttons on my cardigan twice. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I knew how this worked. The narrative wasn't about truth. It was about perception. Dr. Evelyn Monroe greeted me at her office door. She was in her early 60s, with kind eyes and a voice like velvet, warm but precise. I liked her instantly. "I've reviewed the petition your attorney submitted," she said as we sat across from each other. "I understand there are concerns about your cognitive function." I gave a tight smile. "Apparently, remembering a forged signature and recognizing your own name makes people nervous." She smiled back. "Let's just talk." And we did. For over an hour, she asked questions about dates, names, my medications, my past, current events. I recited all the U.S. presidents backwards, starting from Biden, listed my childhood addresses, explained compound interest. We discussed my weekly routine, my financial choices, my sleep habits. Halfway through, she paused and said, "You seem more grounded than most people my age." "I raised a son through 2 recessions and a mortgage crisis," I said. "You don't get through that by being foggy." She laughed, not condescendingly, genuinely. When it was done, she handed me a small printed card. "You'll receive a formal report in a few days, but I can tell you this much now. You're more than capable. Whatever they're suggesting, it won't hold in court." I nodded. "Thank you." "I'm sorry you're going through this," she said softly. "I'm not," I replied. "Not anymore." Later that afternoon, Lynette called. She already had word from Dr. Monroe. "I'll submit the preliminary findings first thing tomorrow," she said. "They tried to preempt it with another letter from an out-of-state psychiatrist who's never met you." Desperate? Exactly. That evening, I sat at my little kitchen table, staring at the rain-streaked window. The apartment didn't feel small anymore. It felt like a command center. Every corner held a strategy. Every drawer had papers that could outlast someone's lies. My phone buzzed. A message. From Andrew. "Mom, please, we need to stop this. Let's talk." I didn't reply. He'd said we needed to talk before, at the motel, through notes, outside the courtroom. Every talk he'd proposed came after another layer of his deceit peeled off. Every request was wrapped in fear, not love. Still, I couldn't sleep that night. Not because I doubted myself, but because I was grieving something no one else could see. The mother I'd been for him. The woman who had covered his mistakes, paid his debts, cheered his victories even when he barely looked back. That mother had been laid to rest somewhere between a motel parking lot and a forged document. But another woman had risen in her place, one who remembered the value of her own name. The next day, Lynette and I met to finalize the complaint for the full hearing. We were not just contesting the deed transfer and the power of attorney, we were pressing charges. Fraud, financial abuse, elder coercion, she listed out, ticking them off like groceries. "We'll start with civil, but if the DA picks it up, there could be criminal charges too." I nodded. Then I handed her something I hadn't told her about before. It was a copy of a check I'd written to Andrew 2 years ago, $75,000. Marked, business loan. A signature in my own hand. Below it, a notarized agreement he'd signed, promising repayment within 12 months. He'd never paid a cent. Lynette raised an eyebrow. "Why didn't you mention this before?" "Because I thought I was being a good mother," I said. "Turns out I was just being used." She slipped the check into the folder. "This helps. Shows a pattern. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a slow bleed. That night, I got another visitor. Not Andrew, not the twins. Kylie. She knocked softly, like she didn't want to be heard by herself. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "Margaret," she said, voice shaking slightly. "Can we talk? Only if it's not about how things got out of hand." She looked down. "Andrew's losing sleep. The kids are scared. He's not himself. Then maybe he's finally meeting the part of himself he left behind." She didn't smile. "I didn't want to do it this way." "No," I said. "You wanted it quiet. No scandal. Just one more signature from the old woman you thought would stay quiet." "I thought you were tired," she whispered. "I thought you wanted rest." I wanted respect. Silence. "I can't make him stop," she said. "But maybe I could help." I crossed my arms. "Why?" "Because I don't think you'll stop. And part of me doesn't want you to." I studied her face. There was something true in it. Not redemption, maybe, but recognition. She pulled something from her purse, a flash drive. "These are the emails, the documents, the communication with the staging company. I kept backups, just in case." I took it. "You'll have to testify," I said. "I know." "Against your husband." "I know." She turned to leave, then paused. "He thought you'd go quietly." I didn't respond. She walked away. I locked the door and stared at the flash drive in my hand. Tomorrow, I'd open it. But tonight, I'd sit with the knowledge that the tide had shifted again. He thought I wouldn't fight. He thought I'd fold. But I'm still here. And I am not done. I waited until morning before plugging in the flash drive. There was power in that choice. Not rushing, not reacting. Just waiting, calmly, on my terms. I brewed tea, took my pills, and opened the blinds to let in the pale light of another cloudy morning. Only then did I sit down at the little desk, open my laptop, and slide the drive into the port. It loaded slowly, like something reluctant to reveal its truth. Inside were neatly labeled folders, deed prep, POA drafts, interior contracts, sale timeline. But it was the folder marked correspondence that made my hands still. I clicked. Emails. Dozens of them. Between Andrew and Kylie. Between Andrew and realtors. Between Andrew and a lawyer I'd never heard of. One thread dated back months before the motel. Subject line, "Mom's assets. Urgent." I scrolled. "If she gets difficult, we'll say she's confused. Her memory's been slipping anyway. The key is to stay ahead of her. We can have the papers notarized in advance. She doesn't need to be there. Just get someone who'll stamp. Once she's settled somewhere else, we'll change the locks. Make it seem like it was her decision all along." I sat back in the chair, the screen still glowing. I wasn't just pushed out. I was planned out. And now I had proof. I printed everything. Every email, every timeline, every contractor receipt with Andrew's signature, every date that lined up with the lies he'd fed me. Then I picked up the phone. "Lynette," I said, "we're going to war." She didn't ask questions. "Bring it in. I'll prep the exhibits." That afternoon, we submitted an amended complaint to the court. Intentional deception, fraudulent notarization, asset concealment, and breach of fiduciary duty under the false POA. The judge, Lynette said, would be hard-pressed not to move it toward criminal referral. When I left her office, the sky had cleared, not metaphorically, literally. Blue stretched wide overhead for the first time in what felt like weeks. The city, scrubbed clean by the last days of spring rain, shimmered in sunlight. I walked 2 blocks to the cafe where I used to take Andrew when he was little. He liked the sugar cubes. I always gave him 2. I ordered tea and sat by the window. Across the street was a playground. A little boy chased pigeons while his mother watched, laughing when he stumbled. I wondered what kind of man that boy would become. Who would he blame when things got hard? Who would he expect to clean up his messes? That night, I got another call. Evelyn Monroe, the psychologist. "I finished my report," she said. "It's done and submitted. And Margaret, I went a little beyond?" "What do you mean?" "I included a supplemental opinion on cognitive abuse. Based on your history, your independence, and the timeline, it's clear to me that your son used manufactured concern as a weapon." I was quiet. "Most people don't fight back," she added. "They're too afraid of losing what little they have left." "But you're not most people." "No," I said. "I'm not." The next day, the court clerk called. The hearing date was moved up. Kylie's testimony had triggered an acceleration of process, especially with the emails now part of the official record. "They're rattled," Lynette told me. "I want them in the room when I speak," I said. "You'll have that." Over the next 2 days, I barely slept. I rehearsed my statement, rewrote it, practiced it aloud. I looked in the mirror and read it to my own reflection. Not dramatic, not sentimental, just facts, steady and sharp, like the truth should be. On the day of the hearing, I wore my navy dress, the one they thought I'd be too old to care about. I put on my mother's brooch, the silver one shaped like a leaf. It had been passed down, not handed over like something disposable. The courtroom was packed. A few reporters, a few spectators. I didn't care who they were. I only watched Andrew. He looked smaller this time, less sure, like the weight of his plan had finally settled onto his own shoulders. Kylie sat beside him, pale but composed. The judge addressed the room, then turned to me. "Mrs. Delaney," she said, "you may proceed." I stood. "My name is Margaret Delaney. I am 74 years old. I was born in this state. I raised my son as a single mother after my husband died unexpectedly at 47. I paid off our mortgage. I paid for my son's education. I never missed a bill." My voice didn't shake. "I was removed from my home under false pretenses. My accounts were accessed using a forged power of attorney. My house was listed for sale without my knowledge. I was labeled confused, too old, too slow to notice. But I noticed." I held up the papers. "I noticed everything, and I am here today to make it clear. I do not give permission. I do not give silence. I do not disappear." The room was so quiet, I could hear the click of the judge's pen when she set it down. Lynette stood. "We rest, Your Honor." The judge nodded. "We'll reconvene in 3 days with a ruling." We left the courtroom in silence. Outside, in the hallway, Andrew caught up to me. He didn't speak right away. Then, "You've made your point." I turned to face him fully. "No," I said. "I've made my line, and you've crossed it for the last time." He didn't follow me. He just stood there, alone. And I walked out, the sunlight waiting, not just on the sidewalk, but in my bones. 3 days later, I dressed slowly. Not because I was nervous, but because I understood the weight of what was coming. You don't step into a room where your life will be decided without pausing, without acknowledging how far you've walked in shoes that weren't always kind to your feet. I wore the same navy dress, the same brooch. But this time, I added lipstick. Not bright, not loud. Just enough. Lynette met me on the courthouse steps. "Today is about clarity," she said. "The judge has all the evidence, all the testimony. Now it's up to her." Inside, the courtroom was quieter than before. Fewer people, no reporters. Just those who had to be there, and those who had nowhere else left to stand. Andrew sat with his lawyer, shoulders tight. Kylie wasn't beside him this time. Instead, she sat on the other side of the room, alone. The judge entered. We stood, sat, waited. She read from a prepared statement, her tone calm and firm, the cadence of someone who'd weighed every word with care. In the matter of Delaney versus Delaney, the court finds that the power of attorney filed on behalf of Mr. Andrew Delaney was fraudulent, lacking verifiable consent, and improperly notarized. Furthermore, the transfer of property was executed under misrepresentation and without the voluntary participation of the original deed holder, Mrs. Margaret Delaney. She paused. Effective immediately, all rights, ownership, and control revert to Mrs. Delaney. All accounts accessed under the forged POA will be subject to audit. The sale is void. The locks will be changed under court supervision. I heard a gasp. I don't know if it was Andrew or me. The judge continued. Additionally, this court recommends referral for potential criminal investigation under the jurisdiction of the district attorney. Charges may include fraud, elder abuse, and unlawful possession of property. It landed like thunder in the room. Andrew turned to his lawyer. The man leaned in, whispered fast. Andrew's hands twitched on the table. The judge looked at me. Mrs. Delaney, your case sets precedent, not just for legal remedy, but for dignity. You remembered who you are. Let the record show, the court did too. I stood when she exited, not because anyone asked, but because I needed the weight of the moment to settle upright in my spine. Outside, the sun was high. Lynette walked beside me, papers in hand, quiet satisfaction in her step. That's the hard part, she said. No, I replied. That was the necessary part. The hard part came before. The silence. The doubt. We reached the sidewalk. She turned to me. What now? I looked down the street. Home. That word had changed. Not just a house, not just brick and windows and roses by the fence, but a place I never left behind, even when someone tried to take it. I go back, I said, and this time, I carry the key. Later that afternoon, a locksmith, hired by the court, met me at my own front door. He was kind, didn't ask questions, just nodded as I showed him the door, the garage, the side gate. Within the hour, every lock had been changed, every trace of their access removed. I stepped inside, dust on the floor, a faint scent of staged furniture polish, but it was still mine. The couch was gone. So were the curtains, but the floorboards creaked in all the right places, and the sunlight hit the kitchen tiles like it always had. I walked room to room, found my grandmother's mirror, left in the garage, wrapped in a moving blanket. Found my teacups in a box labeled donations. I unpacked them slowly, placing them one by one into the cupboard where they belonged. Not for charity, for continuity. That night, I sat in the living room, on a chair they hadn't taken, with a cup of tea in my hand. Outside, the wind stirred the hydrangeas. Inside, I felt something settle, not joy, not triumph. Just truth. I hadn't won everything, but I had reclaimed myself, and that, I realized, was enough. I didn't expect the phone to ring that night. Not after the ruling, not after the locks had been changed, and the house had been made mine again, not just by law, but by presence. I had turned on every light, opened every cabinet, and let the silence know I was home. Silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it just means no one's listening. So when the phone rang, I almost didn't answer, but I did. Hi, Grandma. Emily's voice, small but steady. Hello, sweetheart. I heard, it's over. I glanced around the living room. Boxes still sat in corners. My feet ached from walking on cold tile all day. But yes, it's over. A pause. I'm glad, she said. I didn't know what to do before. I still don't. That's all right, I told her. You don't have to know. You just have to be honest. I want to come see you. You can. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath all week. I'll bring Ben, if that's okay. Of course. She hesitated again, then quietly, I'm sorry for not asking questions sooner. You were told not to. Another pause. He told us you were losing it, that you forgot things, that you were better off. He needed you to believe that, I said, so he wouldn't have to explain what he was doing. Do you hate him? That stopped me. I thought about the motel, the bank, the forged documents, the look on his face when he realized I wasn't going to disappear. No, I said, but I no longer excuse him. The line went quiet, and then Emily whispered, That makes sense. We set a time for the next afternoon. When they arrived, I was in the garden, clipping dead blooms, turning the soil. My hands were dirty, and my knees ached, but the sun was warm, and I welcomed it like a guest I hadn't seen in months. They walked up the path slowly. Ben taller than I remembered, Emily with her arms folded, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to unfold them. You can come in, I said. This is still your grandma's house. Inside, we sat in the kitchen. I made sandwiches. Not the kind they grew up with. My hands weren't as fast as they used to be, but good enough. We ate in near silence. Then Ben spoke. Is Dad going to jail? I don't know, I said. That's not in my hands now. It's in the district attorney's. Emily stared at her plate. He's angry. He says you ruined everything. I imagine he does. He says you turned on him. I sipped my tea. No, he turned on me. I just turned back around. Ben nodded like he didn't fully understand, but respected it anyway. You didn't deserve this, Emily said. No one does, I replied. But that doesn't stop it from happening. I didn't ask them to take sides. I didn't scold or explain further. I just let them sit in the house they once ran through with popsicles and let the weight of everything settle where it belonged. Later, Emily walked into the living room. She stood in front of the fireplace, staring at the empty space where my photos used to be. They packed all this up, she said. They did. Why? To make it look like I'd already left. She turned around. Do you have the pictures? I nodded. In a box. I haven't had the heart to unpack them yet. She crossed the room, opened the nearest box, and began to lift them out. One by one. Frames wrapped in newspaper, memories unwrapped carefully. Ben joined her. They placed them back on the mantel. Me with Harold. Andrew as a boy. Emily's kindergarten picture. The faded photo of my mother in her wedding dress. The room began to look like mine again. Not because of the walls, because of what they held. When they left, I hugged them both. No tears, just long, quiet embraces. The kind that carry both apology and forgiveness without needing to say either. After they were gone, I sat back in the kitchen and stared at the table, at the note Andrew had left me in the apartment. Still folded, still unsigned, still unanswered. I didn't need to open it again. I knew what it said. What mattered now was what I said, and what I chose to say was nothing. Sometimes silence isn't absence. Sometimes it's the most powerful sentence of all. The next morning, I called Donna. I need a new will, I told her, and a living trust. She didn't ask why. She just said, come in at noon. The last one I'd made was nearly 15 years ago, when Harold had just passed, and Andrew was still someone I believed in without hesitation. Back then, the house had been left to him by default. My accounts, my belongings, even the little cedar box that held my wedding ring. I'd trusted him to carry all of it forward with care. Now, every clause needed rewriting. When I arrived, Donna had already drawn up a draft. We reviewed it line by line. I took my time. Not because I doubted her, but because I wasn't going to sign another paper without knowing exactly what it meant. No house to Andrew, I said. No access to accounts, no healthcare decisions, nothing. Understood, she said. And if he contests it? We'll add a no contest clause, she replied. Anyone who challenges the will forfeits everything. I nodded. She passed me the pen. I signed my name slowly, carefully, the real way, with the broken loop in my G and the slight slant in my D. My signature, imperfect, unmistakable. When I was done, she notarized it herself. The stamp clicked down onto the paper like the sound of a door locking behind you. I'll keep a copy on file, she said, and I'll notify Lynette. Good. Back home, I opened the box of keepsakes I hadn't touched since moving back in. Inside were photos, cards, old recipe clippings, and, near the bottom, a letter from Harold, written the year before he died. His handwriting always looked like it had been pressed too hard into the page. If you ever have to stand alone, Maggie, you stand with your back straight and your hands steady. You've always been stronger than you let on. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. That evening, I received a letter in the mail, real envelope, real stamp. From Andrew, no return address. Inside, a handwritten page. Mom, you've made your point. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I'm writing anyway. Not to excuse myself. I know I crossed a line. I panicked. I let Kylie's fear and our debt push me into something unforgivable. But I need you to know, it wasn't hate. It was weakness. I thought I was protecting you. I was really protecting myself. I'm sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted to say it anyway. Andrew. I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as Harold's, not because it held the same weight, but because it came from the same son who once brought me dandelions in a paper cup. I didn't respond. Apologies are seeds. Let them rest in the dirt. Some grow, some don't. The next morning, I called a woman named Esther. She was a social worker I'd met years ago through church. Retired now, but still sharp, still involved. We had tea on the porch, and I told her what had happened. All of it. Not for sympathy, but for purpose. I want to help other women like me, I said. The ones who get pushed out of their own lives. The ones who think being quiet is the same as being safe. She nodded. There's a shelter program that could use someone like you. They've been looking for women with lived experience, not just lawyers. Real voices. I'm interested. Then we'll get you in. That evening, I stood in the kitchen and looked around. The cupboards still weren't full. The house still echoed in certain corners. But it was mine again, and I was no longer afraid of the quiet. I pulled out a notebook from the drawer, wrote on the first page, this is how it started. Not with a bang, not with a betrayal, but with forgetting who I was, and then remembering, loud enough to be heard. I closed it. There was more to write. But for now, I had peace. Not because they gave it to me, because I claimed it. The first time I stood in front of the women at the shelter, I didn't plan to say much. I'd brought tea and cookies, something small, something ordinary. The staff introduced me simply, Margaret's here to share her story, if she's comfortable. I wasn't sure I was, but I stood anyway. Because I remembered what it felt like to have no one look you in the eye, to be seen as a problem, not a person. There were 9 women in the room, different ages, different faces, but the same tiredness in the shoulders, the same caution behind their eyes. I didn't begin with the motel. I began with the house. I lived in that house for 39 years, I said. My son was raised there. My husband died there. My garden bloomed every spring. It was mine. They watched me, silent, waiting. And then one day, someone decided I didn't need it anymore. I told them everything, slowly, plainly. No drama, no embellishment, just the facts, the forged documents, the bank, the courtroom, the silence, the memory of my own name. One woman, maybe 50, asked, "How did you know it was really happening? That it wasn't just you losing control?" "I didn't," I said. "Not at first. Because that's how they do it. They take your confidence first, then your keys." They laughed, quietly, bitterly. But they understood. "I got it all back," I said. "Not everything I lost, but everything I needed." When I left that day, one of the staff members caught my hand. "They're going to ask for you again. You know that, right?" "I'm not a speaker," I said. "No, but you're a mirror. And they haven't seen themselves clearly in a long time." That night, I sat in the living room with a blanket over my knees and the old photo albums spread out around me. I paused at one page. Andrew at 7, missing teeth, grinning in front of a Lego tower we'd built together. I remembered that afternoon. He'd called it Delaney Tower and insisted it would last forever. It collapsed the next morning when the cat jumped on the table. I turned the page. Emily, holding a spoon bigger than her face. Ben, dressed like a robot. Their innocence was still intact, still reachable. I knew that now, and I knew something else. This wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of my own. Not the one I gave away as a mother, not the one I managed for others as a wife, but the one I wrote myself, finally, and without apology. A week later, I returned to court. Not for my case, but for the DA's announcement. Formal charges, fraud, elder financial abuse, forgery, and misrepresentation. Andrew didn't look at me in the hallway. Kylie did. She gave a slight nod. She would testify, they said. The emails, the flash drive, her witness statement. All of it confirmed. She wasn't innocent, but she was cooperative. That mattered now. I didn't speak at the press table. I didn't need to. The law was speaking for me now. Lynette met me outside afterward. "They might offer him a plea deal," she said. "Will it keep him from doing this to someone else?" "Yes." "Then let it happen." She studied me for a long moment. "You're different." "No," I said. "I'm finally the same on the outside as I've always been inside." That afternoon, I went to the hardware store, bought paint, soft blue for the kitchen, pale green for the hallway, something clean, something new. The young man at the register offered to carry it to my car. I let him. "You doing all this yourself?" he asked. "I've done harder things," I said. And I had. Back home, I changed into old clothes, opened the windows, and started rolling color over the walls. One strip at a time, one layer at a time, covering what had been, preparing for what would be. The paint dried slowly. Each morning, I'd walk through the house with a mug of tea and touch the walls with my fingers. Not to check the finish, but to feel the shift. The way a room changes when it becomes yours again. The way silence can finally sound like peace. I took my time with the rest. Rehung the curtains. Planted basil in the window box. Called the roofer about the leak I'd ignored for years, always thinking someone else would handle it. Now I wanted the responsibility. Wanted the choice. And with every nail hammered back into place, I was reclaiming more than a house. I was reclaiming the rhythm of my own life. Emily started coming on Saturdays. She'd bring pastries, half squashed from the bus ride, and sit at the kitchen table while I cooked. She never asked to help. She just showed up, which was more than anyone had done in years. One day, she brought a man with her. His name was Max. Kind eyes, soft voice, hands that didn't fidget when he sat at my table. He asked about the hydrangeas, and when I told him they weren't blooming this year, he offered to help move the soil. "I'm not here to fix anything," he said gently. "Just to lift where I can." After they left, I sat alone and smiled, not because of him, but because of her. She was finding her own way, just as I had to. And she was doing it with her eyes open. Ben came too, though less often. Always awkward, but always earnest. He brought his sketches once, shyly showing me a portrait he'd drawn of the old house, just as he remembered it before the staging. He'd drawn me standing in the window, watching. "You always seemed like you were thinking something big," he said. "I usually was," I told him. We laughed. That Sunday, I received a certified letter from Andrew's lawyer. Inside, a formal apology. Typed, notarized, stiff with legal language, but clear enough. He admitted to forgery, to acting without consent, to misusing my name and property. The statement would be used in court as part of his plea agreement. There was also a handwritten note, separate. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to put it on paper, not for the court, for you. I took something sacred and made it transactional. I thought I was saving us. I was really saving myself from shame. You didn't deserve it. I know that now." "Andrew." I folded it once, placed it in the same drawer as the others. That letter wouldn't be framed, wouldn't be destroyed. It would just live there, quietly, like a wound that healed enough to stop bleeding, but still remembered the pain. That night, I took a long bath. First one since coming back to the house. I let the water rise slow and hot. Let it cover my knees, my hips, my ribs. Let it hold me. Not as a rescue, but as a rest. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't think about what had been taken. I thought about what I'd kept. My voice. My name. My will. When I got out, I put on clean clothes and walked barefoot through every room. No music, no television, just the sound of a house that had learned to listen again. I paused in front of the mantel, touched each photo with 2 fingers, whispered the names of the people in them, not for memory, but for continuity. They hadn't gone, and neither had I. At the edge of the living room, I placed something new. A small frame, simple wood, no glass. Inside, the first page of my notebook. This is how it started. And underneath it, a blank page, waiting. Not for someone else to fill it, but for me. Some days, I forget it ever happened. Not because the pain is gone, but because the story no longer controls the room when I enter it. Now, when I wake up, the first thing I notice is the light. The soft way it leans through the window over my kitchen sink. How it rests on the floor where I used to stand every morning for 40 years. Not as something nostalgic, but as something earned. I no longer check the mailbox with dread. I no longer second-guess the sound of a knock. I no longer rehearse my worth in silence, waiting for someone else to name it. I know who I am. The DA accepted Andrew's plea. No jail time, restitution, public record of guilt. Community service, the judge said, in settings that remind him who he tried to silence. I didn't object. I didn't attend the sentencing. Let the system speak for me now. I was done narrating that part of my life. I've moved forward, not moved on, because some things shouldn't be gotten over. Some things should be remembered so they don't happen again. The shelter asked me to speak monthly now. There's a waiting list for my sessions. Women show up early. They bring notebooks. They take notes. Not on my story, but on their own. One of them hugged me last week and whispered, "I thought I was the only one." "You're never the only one," I told her. "You're just the first to say it out loud." Emily calls every Friday. Ben sends sketches. Little moments come in like sunlight, unannounced but welcome. Kylie mailed me a Christmas card with no return address. I didn't reply, but I didn't throw it away either. And sometimes I still talk to Harold, quietly, not expecting answers, just sharing the air. "See what I did?" I say aloud. "See what I remembered?" And in those quiet seconds, I swear I can feel him smile. There's no revenge in what I did, no great cinematic twist, just dignity. Picked up piece by piece, just truth, spoken without apology. And just a woman, older now, stronger still, who learned that the most dangerous lie isn't the one they tell about you, it's the one they convince you to believe. So if you're reading this and you've felt it, whatever it is, know this. You are not a burden. You are not a ghost in someone else's story. You are not done. Stand up. Say your name. Take one small thing back today, your password, your bank account, your keys, and then take the next. You don't need to burn bridges to walk away. You just need to remember. You were never supposed to disappear quietly. Not you, not ever.